MSME today, we will be talking a bit more on the support infrastructure for e-commerce. To tell you that we have a small summary of yesterday, and we have a space to receive your comments and feedback. And these studies that were carried out were linked, and we have some infographics and summaries, which can be found at the Resource Center of Sempromipe, and we are in the chat to be able to download them. To start this day, I will introduce Mr. David Cabrero, Executive Director of Sempromipe. We'll have the issues that were addressed yesterday, and with regards to the trade facilitation and logistics for e-trade, I give the floor to Mr. Cabrera. Welcome. Thank you very much, Katia. Good afternoon to each one of you. It's a pleasure to be able to share this space. And briefly, I would like to make a pitch of the amount of content that we had yesterday in this initial day of the forum. I think it was very interesting, and there were very relevant inputs for the work of e-commerce and logistics for Central America and Dominican Republic. Definitely the digital issues are starting to work very strongly, particularly in commerce, and we have to take advantage of digitalization to open our markets. Electronic commerce is very important for the economic recovery of the region, and the revenues in these last 3 years have experienced very important changes in consumption habits and sales habits of our MSME, and so 25% of them export digitally, with which we start to have a relevant market that needs the attention not only of the public, but also the private areas to coordinate a common digital market, a solid market and reference market in the region. Definitely our task as Sempromipa is to work on this digital transformation together with the MSMEs and to demand changes in the environment or in the surrounding areas so that the market is solid and can be a reference for the MSMEs of today and tomorrow. We had very interesting moments. One was about trade facilitation related to logistics, and the other is facilitation of trade related to certain topics of infrastructure from the more public perspective. The first one, we heard the large players of the transport, the express transport sectors, DHL and so on, what they see in the region and how they have to change despite being multinational from a resilient perspective, where they have to generate logistic freeways because the pandemic generated all these things, and to ensure the delivery of these products and costs that our government could implement, accelerate in a fast way, simplification of procedures and much more open spaces for the delivery of the products and services that were being commercialized and that are being commercialized nowadays in the region. The facilitation of trade in the region, the process, as we said yes, is like a patient that is recovering and that needs treatment and needs some medicine, such as the improvement of infrastructure for transportation mainly, and that the cargoes can flow and that there's a consistency and there's automatization, and particularly that the relationship of trust in the structures of the region. Our countries must continue to use the recommendations of the trade facilitation of the WTO, and we have to work in a more uh, in a faster way to work with the economic operators that can promote that trust among the actors of the logistic chains. Central America definitely cannot let this opportunity go by to take advantage of the increase of this digital economy and strengthen the regional value chains and integrate to the global value chains in a stronger manner and to take advantage of the advantages that our resources have and the nearshoring to the regional market. As Secretary Lima was saying in another space, the nearshoring should be done between the countries of Central America, Belize, and Dominican Republic, and also the neighboring countries of Latin America and the northern part of the continent, especially with a very strategic area, which is the United States. And in the other panel, we had a very interesting information how the custom infrastructure and the challenges that they have, particularly all the procedures and the challenges that need to be attended in favor of the micro, small, and medium enterprise, precisely to take better advantage of the technological or change or transformation and e-commerce, such as financial inclusion and better financing schemes, and update the disciplines of the digital economy as regards data management and mm, protection of digital data and electronic signatures and forms of payment different to the ones that we're using, and particularly to facilitate and strengthen the capacities of the companies for that adaptation. The trust, the confidence operator is the agents, the logistics and transport members can collaborate as regards the border controls, and the private enterprise should also ensure that we need to have the competitiveness in the digital market. One of the large challenges that we have, and we have been working on this in the last 2 years, is the delivery of the last mile in e-commerce, the delivery of small packages and the family remittances or family packages that are generating a market and a dynamization of the Central American market that we still haven't made a dimension of it, and we haven't monitored it. It is important, the exercise that we heard yesterday about the need to promote the reactivation of the post offices and at national and regional level, and most of the post office were reactivated and started giving services during the pandemic. And for example, from the UPAE, the resources to support the post office divisions for the management of processes and the digital payment mechanism and others. It was intense. We had excellent panel members, as excellent as the ones we have today. We hope that these inputs that we can obtain today, as well as the ones from yesterday, can invite us to make a more solid offer of interinstitutional articulation so that this becomes a more latent reality, and we can take advantage of the regional trade. We have excellent panel members in the regional aspect. We have never had a panel like this. We have the Central American Monetary Commerce, and we will hear what what Comtelca has from the telecommunications infrastructure as an example of what we will hear today. So, Katia, I leave the floor with you, and have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you very much, Mr. Cabrera. Definitely, yesterday was a very rich space of great learning for the for the region. Welcome, all of you who had just connected. We shall start with the first session of this afternoon. we shall have a conversation regarding support infrastructure for e-commerce. And in this space, which will address the topic of support infrastructure for e-commerce, and we'll go more in depth on the factors that are perceived as the main challenges so that the companies can adopt e-commerce and take advantage of the increase of digital economy, global digital economy. For this, to have a very global vision of digital trade, the good practices and innovation on support infrastructure were accompanied during this session Mr. Enrique Munoz, who's the manager of relations of MasterCard, Iris Palma, director of Next Plasam, Edgardo Flores, manager of e-commerce from Managua, Nicaragua, and to moderate the space, I have the pleasure to introduce Marcelo Gurman, General Manager of B2B. Connect B2B is a business of means and works with thematic uh, businesses and market and trends, uh, technology, and construir, with which they have editorial products and events such as Date Day and Commerce Day, Expo Build and Innova, Pyme Evolución, Acelera, and many other of a digital nature. From the beginning of 2019, he is part of the Otanexo community and is a partner of the e-commerce platform. Welcome, Marcelo. I give you the floor in order to moderate this conversation. Thank you very much, Katia, and thank Sempromipo for inviting me to be part of this meeting or this forum and to be able to moderate this panel. We're going to start with Iris, Mario, and Edgardo, and going to work with e-commerce. And I would like to give the introduction before introducing them part of the conclusions from yesterday that we're talking about how the use of e-commerce is growing through social networks and platforms. These statistics show the ones that were presented at 70% of the MSME use e-commerce, digital trade for sales and purchases, and they import and export. More than 50% of the MSME have large challenges with their presence online and access to capital. But the agenda and the challenges are the same around the region. And with this, we are going to talk about on this conversation during the next 45 minutes. And for this, if you allow me, I'm going to start by introducing the persons who accompany me today in this conversation, Mr. Enrique Munoz, who's the Manager of Relations of the Government with MasterCard for Central America and Digital Transportation Project for public companies, how the payments without contactless in Costa Rica, innovation and electric micro mobility for governments to offer the citizens new options of sustainable uh, uh, cards and others related to e-commerce and services. Economist and industrial engineer has a lot of experience in transformation, economic, high impact economic sectors in Latin America as a whole. Secondly, welcome Enrique. And shortly we will greet with an open microphone. Secondly, I introduce Iris Palma. She's director of Mextata, Central American tech company with office in Salvador and Panama. Is the advisor of the board of directors of the Salvadoran Association of Industrialists and of Latin America, the Caribbean, Portugal, and Spain. She is a consultant for USAID for the preparation of the evaluation program for El Salvador and consultant of UNDP, uh, reassessment of digital strategy of UNDP and the leadership of and the professional program of the Department of State. And she has a master's in technology and business, one of the 100 leadership women according to Suma magazine, and one of the most leaders of Estrategia y Negocios magazine. And welcome. And Edgardo Flores, He is Digital and organizer of the regional event Digital Today. He has a long trajectory of e-commerce in Central America and has been a speaker in many e-commerce days in the region. Edgardo is a very important entrepreneur, has worked with more than 80 business showing his digital experiences. He has a lot of experience in digital areas such as blockchain. He's graduated from the Central American Technological University in publicity and just lately ended a postgraduate at MIT in Stanford, Massachusetts. And in Yates Business School, Eduardo also forms part of the volunteer program of the MSME NGOs and the adoption of digital trade and design of web pages. Welcome to each one of these. To speak more, my participation was to read who they are, so I'm going to allow you to speak, and we'll go with the first question. Technology is advancing very quickly, and the services, both for the production of digital services for products and solutions for e-commerce trajectory. What are the trends, the most important trends that you see in international e-commerce, and what are the tools and capabilities that the companies need to have to participate in the digital markets? To give the floor in order, ladies first, if it's okay with you, it is welcome, and we give you the floor for this first question. Thank you very much, Marcelo. It's a pleasure to all my colleagues and to everybody who has joined this meeting. I can have many questions and many dimensions for this question. I like to focus in the capacities and tools for the MSME. And the MSME is characterized in the region. They have different to Latin America or South America and North America. And so the capacities that they develop could be a little bit different. In my criteria and experience, there are three things that every MSME should do to take advantage of e-commerce. One is to unlearn and to relearn. And this is a model. This is a world where their business model is going to change and to evolve their business model. And they should be that way. If they're not seeing the DNA of the companies, they're not doing anything of a trade. Second, the companies need to learn to fear the innovations. There's a way of making their business totally digital and to sell much better than the traditional. And third, precisely to be agile, to be speedy, to be speedy, and they should be present for the MSME. And this is where they have the particular challenge. And this only happens when the people change more than technology. The people have to change. Absolutely. The digital transformation, and more than digital, it's transformation. And transformation starts by the people, with the people. Thank you very much. What is your vision, Enrique?
Marcelo, y
Good
encantado
afternoon, Marcelo. It's a pleasure to share this space with you, and very thanks to Sempromipe, and greetings to Edgardo and all the people who are connecting at this time.
desde Mastercard con una visión un poco
As
más
of MasterCard with a vision
acerca
more than
de la
just the
tecnología
cards, this is a
donde
company,
está
a
apoyando
technology company
no
that now
solo
is
los actores
supporting
tradicionales,
not only the
como el
traditional
banco con el
actors such as
gobierno
the
en este
banks
caso
or the
con algunas
businesses, we're also
políticas
working with
con
fintechs
gobiernos para
and with
sacar
governments in order to accelerate
con esta visión más
digitalization. So a
holística,
bit with that
un poco más
more
amplia,
holistic
yo
vision or
puntualizaría
broader
en
vision,
tres
I would like to
potenciales
talk,
retos que vemos
or I
para los
would talk
pymes.
about three challenges that we see for the MSME, particularly for
A la
digital
hora de
trade.
realizar los
When
pagos,
they make the
vemos que los
payments,
dueños de
we
las
see that the
MSMEs
owners of the
generalmente utilizan
MSMEs generally use their
para su
own
negocio.
capital
Por
for their
ende, ellos
business,
necesitan
and
mejores
therefore
herramientas
they
para
need
poder
better
pagar a sus
tools to be able
proveedores
to
y
pay their
controlar sus
providers and
ingresos.
control their
Algunos
expenses.
datos que tenemos a
Some
nivel
data
global
that
es
we
que
have, for
80%
example,
de
more
las
than
MSMEs
80% of the
utilizan
MSME in developed
tarjetas
markets use their
personales. En
personal
estados
cards.
menos desarrollados,
And in
aproximadamente el
Less developed countries, they use 100% of the MSME use their personal cards. So we are seeing how fintechs, with whom we're working to offer solutions to the MSME and to face this topic specifically. This is a point when they make payments to their providers, suppliers, or third parties. When they receive payments, the owners of the MSME experience problems because of the delays on receiving payment from their customers, and consequently, the sales are come to a halt in one way or another when they don't allow or don't accept electronic payments. Digitalize the way of receiving payments is a challenge that exists, and we're working. And some of the data is more than 80% of the MSME fail due to cash flow. And nearly 80% or 77% receive payments in a delayed form from large corporations, or they have very long periods without being paid. And the third topic that we see that is very interesting is everything that has to do with, and Iris was mentioning, is the management of the digital presence. And this is to be prepared to receive payments with a non-present cards. Some data show us that more or less 45, 46% of the small businesses are ready to receive payments with non-present cards, and 70% of the large companies are ready for this. So one would see that there's many challenges here, but there's also large opportunities for the development of this large industry. Thank you, Enrique. A challenge without a doubt that we have to face in the short term, not even the medium term. This is a big challenge that the MSME have in the region. Edgardo, what is your vision? It's a pleasure, Marcelo. I agree with everything that the colleagues have talked about. And as you know, I'm in the academic part, and I have had to train many of the MSME and guide them. And I've also had my business, my own business, and e-commerce and Shopify. And I've had many experiences on both sides. And also there's large companies that have over 5,000 products. I will talk about three specific things. One is that the MSME need to have analytical skills. I have gone through processes of Google and that, and there's not one company that has said to me, and I have worked with a lot of these companies as well. I think that in the MSME world, sometimes when we don't stop to look at the numbers or the accounting part and the metrics, what am I doing, what's working, it's very difficult to find an MSME that's managing well the model of purchasing, no matter what channel it is it Facebook or Google, when we have a higher drop-off of the user. I think it's very important because we enter into a world where there is a lot of information that is and then not used. An article, a business review says that 3% of the companies have data that they have obtained in a good way. And from there, there is a big problem as regards data. Then the positioning, I think the positioning is very important. In e-commerce, you have to know how to position your products with the intention that they require less than one person interacting. And to this I refer is working through something more specific, but the product should sell by itself. And the images, well-made images and text well written, and what is a solution that you present for the service, and identify what are those products that have greater work opportunity. And this is very important in the positioning. Nowadays, uh, when there are large markets and there's MSME, what really is relevant is your brand. The branding has been underestimated in e-commerce, but nowadays it's more relevant. Just the brand needs to be very important. It's just a recognized brand, and the MSME need to work better or more on the positioning and support and success cases and content generated for the users. And I think this is going to be important. And lastly, added to what my colleagues mentioned, is automation. It's very difficult to have an MSME of 3, 4 people to be able to do everything. It's very difficult to see the scalability if one is not ready with a automation plan, with a flow and mails, and what happens with a chat, and how am I going to attend those consultations in order to close a business in a more effective way. So I think those three, in my opinion, would be fundamental things that the MSMEs need in order to have an e-commerce where they can sell and understand better what they're doing. In the end, there's better practices of existing businesses and bring them to e-commerce. Uh, But I do think that the infrastructure is important to understand and to know about it and to see what's managed in cloud. There's many solutions that are very similar. Nowadays, it's with Shopify or Waze and Magento, but most of the users, more than a tool, is understand what they're going to do with the tool and why. This is what is important.
De hecho, en relación a esto que comentás, cada vez se habla más que del e-commerce, del unified commerce, es decir, de ese comercio unificado, porque al final son diferentes puntos de venta, puntos de contacto con los consumidores y ya no son canales separados. Es como que lo on se volvió off y lo off se volvió on y ya todo está intermezclado y tenemos que dar el mismo servicio, no importa el canal, y la respuesta a ese consumidor que va a buscar en un lado, comprar en otro, o comprar en otro y buscar en uno. Pero siempre tenemos que estar a disposición de ese comprador y es parte de los retos que tenemos, cómo unificamos esos diferentes canales. Y uno de los aceleradores que suele tener el comercio electrónico, como un factor habilitador del comercio electrónico, son estas plataformas que conectan vendedores y compradores brindando un servicio integral en ese sentido del comercio digital. Iris, me gustaría tu opinión en cuanto a ¿cuál es la importancia de estas plataformas masivas que facilitan el tráfico a las pequeñas empresas? ¿Cuáles son los retos que tienen estas plataformas para operar en países como El Salvador, desde donde nos estás hablando, o cualquiera de los países de nuestra región? ¿Cómo funcionan estas plataformas que conectan masivamente compradores y vendedores?
Gracias, Marcelo. Mira, primero, yo creo que lo que demuestra este auge de plataformas de esta robustez es que hablar de comercio electrónico debe ser ya tema de la agenda de negocios de cualquier MIPYME independientemente de su sector. Eso quizás es lo primero que nos vienen a demostrar. Segundo, es que la innovación siempre va a estar presente en el ámbito empresarial. Complejo tener personas adecuadas para esto. Yo no sé cómo hacerlo. Creo que esto ya está dejando de ser una excusa muy viable en materia de negocios. Y por el otro lado, demuestra que existen opciones precisamente para que las MIPYMEs puedan acelerar su proceso de transformación digital. Pero más allá de una herramienta...
And more than that's a tool for these spaces that make buyers and sellers come closer. So the importance is how the existence of this type of platform create value chains for SMEs, how these platforms become not only part of the value chain of the SMEs or the industries of one sector, but how new roles are generated by the SMEs. They make the SMEs to go back one step, redefine their processes in order to answer to the commercialization demands digitally. And I'm going to say that for the SMEs, it has been complex, but these companies provide orientation to this regard, or maybe they also put the spotlight on the abilities or capacities of the SMEs. I think that on the other hand, these platforms come and allow the SMEs to identify new gaps, new ways of doing businesses. So I think that there's this transcendental step that goes from selling online and doing businesses. It's not only the seller-buyer relation, but it's a whole relation with my suppliers, with the whole supply chain, and not only for physical products that require physical facilities, but also other products and services, which is part of this. Of course, is has its challenges because everything that is disruptive, everything that changes the status quo will mean challenges. And I guess the challenges are the following three. And I'd like to say not only in El Salvador, but in Central America, where we have a company, we have experience. One is the regulatory framework, and for those colleagues that have mentioned topics like payments, how we can accelerate payment processes, the platforms that you require, so that we have the motivation to do this, so that the platform and the companies behind them continue incorporating technologies to become more agile in e-commerce. And on the other hand, it is more critical, which is the cultural change needed. And it reduces stress for the SMEs because you can buy a product here or buy that online also. So this cultural change needs to happen instead of buying at a physical place that you can buy online, use your card. All this process change is critical. And finally, one of the important challenges is how you do this so that this added value is important for the SMEs, but also for the customer. How you generate that value that makes you a differentiator, how you generate trust in those factors that come out of the platforms like deliveries, logistical processes, how all this agility and that you can offer through virtual platforms to other offline actions like deliveries. And also an additional challenge that we have, and this has been discussed previously in this for, is the interconnectivity. People that have access to internet at an affordable price, who can use these platforms, who can justify the necessary investments to reduce their technological debt in SMEs, so that they can have access to these tools. The path has not been easy, but I'd like to leave you with the idea that this is a non-return point where we could, if we should think about if this is good or not, I guess it's not the time. We should only look forward, and the SMEs that understand this are the ones that are going to persevere in the digital environment. Well, in your case, you have educated many people in SMEs in how to access this new world. I was asking Iris, it is e-commerce, marketplaces, platform for buyers and sellers, or is it more one company that has its own platform? Which is your recommendation? This is a very good question, and as a matter of fact, I was thinking based on the mixed feelings that I have. I think it's a mix. I would go with the small marketplace where I have confidence with the structure that I know, with a make make ourselves comfortable. Let's say where a company can change the game rules and affect others. Many companies have been affected by selling something on the networks, let's say the Facebook marketing that is informal, but there were people who um, uh, build their communities in this and grew, and they have businesses in Amazon now. The game rules have changed, and I believe that you need to work on the short term on a comprehensive solution that will provide and make it possible for to have an important number of customers. But at the same time, I need to continue working on my own things, because that is going to be my brand identity, my position or positioning. And I believe that's something that you lose. And because I like analytics so much, is customer data. And a third party, let's say that a customer needs to be benefited. And the third actor, the marketplace, is the one that is going to use that more to its benefit than the SMEs. So I think that above that, to try to win experiences and try to differentiate with the experiences, there are marketplaces that where, for example, there's an Amazon where it's very difficult to uh, uh, become a competitor because there are so many already there. But at the end, it is valid to say, and the important thing is not to feel comfortable and do anything. I can have my own product, and eventually, if I want to grow, I have to do this with my own business. And that implies to have my own website. Absolutely. I'm going to put another hat on my head. In one of these hats that I have is online stores. We have around 3,000 SMEs that have their own store, and the evolution is that they shouldn't have their own stores without integrating them into uh, mall or central platform. Why does it have to be like this? At the end, it should be both of them. And at the end, I think that this is the way that should be developed looking forward. I think that one of the problems that the region has in terms of e-commerce development is financial inclusion. How are we facing this in terms of banking access for people, and how this is affecting financial inclusion? I'm going to refer to the SMEs. How are they approaching this to be able to have do more digital payments, not with a mix off or online? I have an example. For example, my first digital sale, someone wrote on Facebook, then I said where they can pay me, and so. But this is not really a digital sale. This is a digital contact. How are you supporting in this sense? Marcelo, thank you very much. MasterCard is doing efforts that are very important in all the Central American region. Probably you have heard about the efforts done in the Alliance for Central America in Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, which has an enormous financially inclusive factor, fintechs, development, SMEs, but also in Panama. For example, in 2021, an important partnership was subscribed in order to accelerate the digitalization in Panama and also economic recovery. In countries such as Costa Rica, where I am based, we are working here very strongly in financial inclusion through services like public transport, which is the channel to massify the transformation. But I want to tell you is that in every place, the common denominator is always the SMEs and the challenges that SMEs have. And it's a complex topic because the challenge lies in how you visualize solutions with a vision of an ecosystem and not in an isolated manner, uh, not communicated, not talking to each other. I'd like to hear the words collaboration, cooperation, public-private partnership. All of that is important. So I would say, and maybe this is a reflection or a message that I have, that the challenge possibly is of technological matter. And now Edgardo was mentioning this, and you too. It's a challenge of permanent or continuous transformation, resilience, because the digital world surprises every day. Maybe you heard that 3 months ago in Costa Rica, we had an important attack, cybernetic attack, and several essential services were vulnerated. And recent studies that have been performed in other places obviously show that you have to prepare some ease to face everything that deals with cybersecurity. For example, if I'm a personal small entrepreneur, a woman producing at home, maybe what we have is a router, a normal internet connection, a computer. How can we arrive to that woman and say, you know, today we have cyber attacks and they can uh, attack and close your business from one day to another. This is a challenge that is interesting. And in this regard, we're working on cybersecurity directly with the authorities and the SMEs. But coming back to the topic on financial inclusion, Marcelo, we have gaps. We have gaps among the different countries and also to the inside of the countries. May it be bigger cities with higher financial inclusion, because rural zones are far away from financial inclusion. But there is this challenge how to even out the floor or the environment so that electronic commerce, regional electronic commerce takes or it can be scaled up importantly and generate attraction for SMEs. And I believe that at the end, Marcelo, the technology is there, the solutions are there, and every day the digital world will surprise us with another attack, something new, and we will be surprised. But the solutions are there. There are going to be fintechs, and many more are coming. But there is an important topic that is key. It is about agreements, about generating the basic conditions at the market level for the development of essential infrastructure that require the SMEs require in order to develop their businesses and make them grow. One data that I like to listen to, one of these force that SEPROMIPE has organized, because SMEs are born digitally. 40% of them accept digital payments. So we have new beings in the ecosystems that have a different chip that are adapting to new challenges, but we also still have the challenge of transforming the ecosystem as a whole. Excellent, because continuing to the next question, if someone does have a question for some of the panelists, you can write that on the chat or raise your hands. We have one raised hand. I'm going to give the floor for your question, and but the floor is open so that you help us in asking whatever is of interest to you. For the three of you, and whoever would like to answer, e-commerce has basically 4 pillars. It's like 4 legs, like the table. And if it only has 3, it cannot stand well. So the 4 legs are to have a space to sell, have infrastructure for the business. Then the logistical side, I cannot sell online if I am not able to deliver or dispatch. An online store has to have a solution for that. And of course, take care of the payment. As Enrique is saying, if the persons cannot do checkout, probably they will not buy. But of course, if I don't have digital marketing, no one will know that I exist. So there's no way. It's like opening a store and decorating it very beautifully, and then just pray for a customer to come in and buy. Normally, what we do is some advertising campaign. From these four pillars, how do you see the challenge that SMEs are facing? How well are they trained? We have talked about that a little, but where are the points of pain for this? Who would like to start?
Sí, gracias. Mira, yo
Thank
creo
you.
que,
And as I was saying, and from the academical part, having had experiences with some students, customers that have worked in these pillars, I think that to start or to make an entry is easy. They have campaigns every 5 minutes, so it's easy to enter market. There are integrators that are offering also logistic services. There are agencies or freelancers that provide community management services, campaign management, and so on. So you have like a variety from where to choose from. And because it looks so easy, there is frustration when people make an entry, organize their e-commerce, or maybe they find out that they have problems with the delivery and all of that. So I think that one of the challenges is to take time to conduct the research prior to beginning something, going for an adventure. Sometimes we're a little bit too quick. Sometimes people, like an example that I know, that started all of a sudden, and when they started personalizing things, taking care of stock, they said to me, well, I thought that this was going to be easier, like playing on a button, and there the people who just invested and too much, or they continued spending, and they didn't have an orderly budget, and it was very easy for them to begin or to enter the market. But the question is, how can I do them well? To the purpose, I need to train myself or make a research on success cases. And many agencies are trying to provide those type of resources, but not many users are taking this. So I guess this is a challenge. No, please, Iris, go ahead. I'm going to be brief, and I think that, well, there are challenges in all the four pillars, as we all know, but I'd like to stress one particular, which is digital marketing. And I guess many SMEs that have been working with traditional marketing, the new DNA of digital marketing, which is not only about advertising, but to understand your customer, that might be a totally digital customer, a customer that doesn't want the same bureaucracy of a physical store. They want to do this digitally, and that you just go through the processes that you have in place in presence to transfer this to the digital world. You have to understand that this is another reality. This is another customer that needs another type of messages, that probably needs a message that moves. So I think that one of the challenges of the micro enterprises is to value the digital marketing, which is not only to advertise on Facebook or call center, which is the data topic, is to analyze data far beyond how much did they buy, where are the preferences, what are the characteristics of merchandise that they are not buying, where is that information that the customer won't tell me, but that I have that sensitivity to know what is behind there, of who is on the other side of the computer, a person who buys not because I am what I am, but because they buy because of a certain factor, and I need to know why. So this is an interesting topic that we need to value the digital marketing topics, which generates new roles, new competences in people that are addressing this. Excellent, Enrique. I would answer to your question, Marcelo, and this is complementing what Iris and Edgardo have mentioned. I think that the four components that you mentioned have a common denominator that has to do with a learning topic, talent and capacity development in order to approach any of the challenges that the SMEs are facing. So this is more or less what the panel members were mentioning. Every challenge that we take will go through those capacities, a challenge that the SMEs have to adapt and be able to build a sustainable business in time. I know I'm not answering with new perspectives, because here at this forum, it has been talked much about talent, capacities, but I think that this summarizes very well the main challenge in facing this transformation, so that we are capable of developing these capacities, understand the market, analyze the data, as Iris is saying, to understand the behavior of my customer or the disposition of my customer to buy my product, that I need to be aware and have that type of sensitivity. And at that moment, then we are going to, the SMEs are going to have be better in better conditions, but to that they need to have a process development that is not easy. That's why we have important alliances, digital partnerships that we call MasterCard alliances that we have brought for this process. But we need to acknowledge that this is not an easy process. It takes its time, and many learn just by experience, by some mishappenings, possibly. And there are some of us that they jump 3 times and they are still standing, but others fail and die. So the key is to build a process, and I guess this has been one of the messages from my colleagues, that it has been a sustained process to take the SMEs to the next level. And to finish, Edgardo was mentioning something very interesting. If I'm as a me, I will probably sell through a social network. And probably, Marcelo, as you were saying, what I do is just agree on a price, and then I take my car and then I deliver the product, and they will pay to me. And this is not e-commerce. This is not what we want. But all this goes through this capacity building and talent development process.
We shall see now the questions that we have from the audience, and somebody who will raise your hand, Ada, we can give her the floor. You can write on the chat. Ada, your microphone is open. You can ask your question. No questions? So you can ask later, but I'm going to talk about the questions that were written on the chat. There's a person who asks, given the experience that what we have on this topic, what advice can you give a company to implement this? Many MSME receive technical assistance of the development projects so are not implemented and take out of the market the suppliers. How to address the problem to strengthen the ecosystem? And definitely, what do you do? Everything that you learn in many courses that are being offered free, paid, all types of courses. What can you do to obtain funding to give the first steps in the digital ecosystem world? I think that the key is in translating all those trainings, structured or non-structured, in a project that is aligned with your thoughts. How does a bank lend you money? When you have a guarantee because you have business plan and you need the money because I'm going to export, for example, to bring this, the planning culture, which is something that I have seen in some micro and small businesses, like a very important challenge, the way you make strategic planning at the beginning of the year or a couple of months before that, and you make your operational plan and financial plan and can fund yourself with the long-term funding with the suppliers because you have this expectation. Make your digital strategy not only marketing, but how that you want to increase the 10% to give a number on the sales as the e-commerce platform and how this is going to help. And this is a work uh, into the companies that can structure an adequate guide and financing plans and e-commerce, and they have been able to obtain financing and prevention of banking because they have been able to bring the DNA of a future project for the future and let's say loans or microcredits, which is probably easier. Now I'm going to enter this new niche of the market. So I think the issue here is not to ask money just for the sake of asking money, but do it within the framework of a strategy that is linked to the strategies of the company. I think, at least in my experience, I have seen that it has worked. And maybe this could be one of the different ways of doing so. Maybe my colleagues have different experiences. We are in a process right now of funding, of growing as a business and talking specifically about the academy. And I don't know in the end if we're going to be able to make the required investment, but it has been a good experience to do things well from the very beginning. I've had a lot of businesses of the different MSMEs that I have, and they have been different experience of different types, from restaurants to agencies, etc. But in this case, we are advancing on a serious process, let's say in the accounting area, and to do everything in the legal area and brand registration. Sometimes in different business, I didn't think about it. I didn't consider it as something that was important. And I thought that without registering all these things, I was going to be able to open a business. But when you have the numbers, as Idris was saying, the strategy, and anything that's on writing, it can withhold anything or stand with it. That you have to do things transparently, and you're capable of being audited. And so, at least bring certain historical information that backs that information of the people that are working with one on the team and the context and the experience to document everything in writing and present it before the investor, before the banks, etc. And this is the way to work, to have everything working and everything in order, and to be to pay the taxes and all of the accounting part. And sometimes the MSMEs, I tell you because of my own experience, either they don't do it correctly because they don't have the knowledge, but I think it's important.
Enrique.
Enrique, and I would complement with what the colleagues are saying, Marceli mentioning, maybe with this idea in mind, that we are not always born having learned. And if we're in an entrepreneurship, you're learning of everything. They're learning about the business, about life, about marketing, about finances, about accounting. And well, if an entrepreneur or an MSME entrepreneur would know everything, probably they would be in a different condition. So I think that the important thing here is, and something that the MSME ecosystem offers, and it's interesting, is that openness to be able to look for help, serious and professional help, in order to be able to achieve what Edgardo Nires had mentioned, make a good business plan and a strategy, and work on a good pitch to get to our investors and with whom we are interested in working with. And the MSME ecosystem offers that. There's many instances, and what I would answer the person who so kindly made a question is we are on a learning curve, and it could probably be cheaper to ask than to go through all of the pain. There's people that are already expert on this, many people helping the MSMEs. There's a lot of will, a lot of synergy, many government institutions and non-government institutions, and many public-private partnerships that can help so that the road is less rocky, and maybe reach the correct financing for the company. And also, we all know that this is one of the large challenges that exist for the micro, small, and medium enterprise, to get that so desired financing and to be able to go forward. I agree with you. And and I would like to add something, because we are currently starting in Costa Rica with a program with the Minister of Economy and Commerce and Science and Technology to support 100 MSME on their digital onboarding. But this is not a training process, it's a consultancy process in support to the sales management. And part of what we're doing is to look for pairs, the support of platforms and systems, which in the end is not a funding, but is to have during at some point in time, one of the MSME, as Edgardo said, I have done so many, is a program where I was giving 90% of discount in an automation platform. What this did was that I could enter into that world in a different manner. Of course, there's no free lunch, as they say. And so I had to pay a part and do my work, because otherwise that percentage that I was going to pay, I was going to throw it away. But the truth is that there's other opportunities. The recommendations is to look for programs, many of them in the region, besides being the training program, and that you should have the support from private enterprise that will give with benefits the resources that you need in order to develop your online sales. And talking about the fact that I touch on automation, there's a question about a friend that is following us on Facebook, Sempromipe Facebook, asks, what is the best automation software? If anybody has an answer and knows about it, what is the best automation software? What do you recommend to automate? And I'm going to leave the question open to see if you can respond to that. I use several. As MSME, I started to use an freemium models that have a certain scope, and then you have to pay. The more popular ones are, for example, in the case is Hotspot and CRM, and it has a free service with certain limitations, but you can resolve with that. and you can work with almost any application. In the case of email, mail shoot has facilities and constant contact, optimotion in the case of leads and generation of prospects. These are tools of about $10, $15 a month, but there are any amount of apps. The most popular ones could be those, and also the bots, that there's many options. But I think the important thing here is more than the software is what what do I expect to achieve? And for this, we really need that learning that we have talked about, that have historical information and the interaction, because many of these options uh, can elevate the cost in a drastic manner. Let's say I can pay $10, $15 a month, and then I realize that there's many interactions, and it already sent me to uh, to a higher level of that, and it's probably going to be $100 a month. So it's important to know what you're going to achieve and what is the cost of acquisition for each prospect or each person that I would like to obtain as a client. And in this way, see what is the most convenient for me. Excuse me for interrupting. What we want to do is automate, because there's many automated process. We have to know what we have in each one of the processes. I would like to, we have 5 minutes on this panel because we need to continue on the agenda for this event, and make a last question when the end of the year comes. We in Costa Rica using the wish list to the Christmas wish list. What would you ask the governments of our countries to accelerate this digital ecosystem, to give support to these MSME? That should be their task so that this ecosystem evolves and continues to grow.
Bueno,
El primer pedido al gobierno.
como hablaste de la carta al niño,
As
como
you were
decía,
talking about
y
the Christmas wish list and trying to simplify it, Marcelo, I think that a request here is,
digamos, liderar en lo que
let's say, to lead in what they have to lead to facilitate. I think facilitate is a key word, the development of the ecosystem. We all complain about the difficulties that an MSME faces. I think I would summarize that facilitate as possible and generate the conditions for the development of the industry should be the main role of the government. And I think that there are organizations such as Sempromipe, SICA in Central America working hand in hand, as you were mentioned, in the case of Costa Rica, with the MAKE, with the MISIT. And you can make great things without that the government has to include itself more than necessary in facilitating the road for the entrepreneurs. I think that
si yo pudiera hacer
I agree with Enrique. If I could make a wish list, personal data and fiscal incentives so that the companies can experience and enter into the e-commerce, and to accelerate this so that the MSME can enter into the digital market, and good physical infrastructure, because we need that motorcycle takes the product on time. And I'm talking about traffic, and I talk about also order the traffic so that we can all comply with a good and fast delivery of e-commerce. And what we need is more formation or education and other types of programs because not all the MSME need the same. They need scaled up programs for by size of company, by location, by type of product, and for infrastructure that the MSME should have. You need to make this analysis. And finally, on digital ecosystem and understand that this is its own ecosystem that the government needs to enter to work on these and measure the impact because this is going to the way how you're going to be able to justify the investment of public funds, which are always limited on this topic, and then you will be able to impact on the academic educational programs in order to prepare the the new roles or the roles that exist that the MSMB will need in order to be able to prepare them. Edgardo, my wish sounds like my wish list, huh?
Como en un WhatsApp más uno y listo.
As plus, as says in WhatsApp, yes, that and plus one, and many times incentives and education and better conditions of access to loans and funding.
También compromiso paradójicamente y la empresa privada.
In a paradox, as a paradox, they when it's the MSME, the providers, when I talked at the beginning of payment conditions, they give us 90 days for payment and 120 days. And I've worked with all types of clients, and I've had clients that if I would only depend on this, then I would be broke immediately. And so we need to have other sources of funding and to buffer that, but there needs to be greater awareness and less red tape in the procedures to create companies and be more open in that sense. More success cases, I think, is important. Access to data, e-government, have access to data on e-government. There's interesting areas that are being done, and I've heard several saying that they're already working on that, but it's going to be very important and whatever gives support to data for the MSME. If you allow me, and just to make a comment that that I can say, coordinate government that coordinates with all of the large amount of actors that this ecosystem has. These are the MSMEs, but it's also the banks, is the development banking system, there's procedures and permits, everything that Iris and Ricardo were mentioning. Really, a government that can lead and coordinate this, and not only as a fad. Oh yeah, this was the pandemic, and everybody talks about the economic recovery of the MSME. No, it's a sustained recovery with a medium and long term to be able to achieve outcomes and impact with quality on this ecosystem. Thank you all three very much for your contribution. We saw the roadmap that we need to have as entrepreneurs and MSME to enter into this digital ecosystem, the pillars and skills that we need to have. We made the request to the governments and how we need them to support. If you allow me, Katia, thank you to Centro MIPE for inviting me to be part of this space. And I would like to invite the audience of this forum because the e-commerce comes for a space in October. It's a good moment to get together with the ecosystem to understand and learn. On the 18th of October, it's in Costa Rica, 20 October in Panama, and 25 in Dominican Republic. Commerce Day, we have been doing this for the past 5 years, sometimes face-to-face and sometimes in this hybrid world that we have to do. It's a good moment and it's free of charge, not selling. I'm inviting you for a day of great learning, great networking, great interaction, and to see how this ecosystem works. We hope that you can accompany. I reiterate, 18 October, Costa Rica, 20 October in Panama, and 25 October in Dominican Republic. And I can tell you how you can visit without cost to these events. Again, Katia, I use 3 minutes more, and thank you to Sempromito for always making me part of these initiatives. Thank you so much. Excellent space. And I have to say something, Iris. I love the term that you mentioned, digital sensitivity, because in the end, it's to put the entrepreneur and the consumer in the center of this and make these qualitative analysis of which is my differentiating value and this experience of the customer. Why are they buying from me? So I already wrote it down, and thank you very much for all the contribution. College MasterCard and Digital, and our dear Marcelo Burman for facilitating this conversation, such a fascinating conversation. And thank you to all of the people who are joining this forum to comment that we have a brief summary of yesterday's spaces and also a space to receive your comments and feedback. And we have links of the studies and infographics where you can find it at Resource Center of San Promita. We're sharing here in the chat. And obviously tomorrow to be able to find the summary and documentation related, and of course the recordings, the related recordings to the whole forum. So because of time, we shall start with the next panel is support infrastructure to digital trade. And in this panel, we will be addressing the issue of public policies to promote e-commerce in the region. And throughout this forum and with the data that was been presented, we know that there's important advances of how e-commerce has changed, or digital trade has changed the ways how the companies buy and sell in the region. And we count with important challenges to overcome, and particularly in this pillar of support infrastructure. And to address this topic and have that vision of the institutions and the partners in development for Central America as a region, we're accompanied by Mayra Alfaro de Moran, who's a senior specialist of the private sector of uh, World Bank Group, Jorge Asbun, the president of the Council of Central America, CCIE, and it comes in representation of Central American Federation of Chambers of Commerce, PECAMCO. Amparo Arango, director of the Telecommunication Development Forum, and Indotel, Héctor Izárraga, director of Engineering Technical Regional Council of Central America, Conterca, Randall Romero, economist and representative of the Central American Monetary Council. And I also have the pleasure to introduce Bernardo Diaz, who will be the moderator for this session. Bernardo is professor at the Buenos Aires University, visiting investigator and consultant of UN, and he had productive development at the Ministry of Production and Work and Labor in Argentina, has worked with linked products to public policies on digital economy and e-commerce in several countries of Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Bernardo. I give you the floor. Thank you very much, Katia, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the invitation to Sempromipo for moderating this panel, and extremely relevant speakers for public policies and for the future incentives to develop e-commerce in Central America and in the SICA countries. We have 45 minutes, and the session is being recorded, and at the end of the session, we shall have a space for some questions. and pay attention. We will pay attention to your questions. At the end of the presentation, we will leave a space so that they can answer them. Very well. Remember, when we ask the question, when you ask a question, please give the name to whom you're addressing the question. Katia presented the participants. I'm going to read a bit more about each one and the biography of each one, starting from Mayra. She's a senior specialist in the private sector of World Bank and has more of 20 years of experience in the private sector at the World Bank. She has led projects for the public-private sector, including digital entrepreneurship, MSME, trade facilitation, and the reform of the climate investment. Her work has contributed to help to create better conditions for investments of the private sector in Central America. She's also worked in projects from Mexico, Colombia, and Bangladesh, and she graduated from Delaware, University of Delaware, and others. Jorge Asbun, president of the Central America Central FECAMCO. He's an entrepreneur and forms part of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry of El Salvador since 2007 and has had positions within FECAMCO and the Consultative Committee of Economic Integration. We're going to have Amparo Arago, Director of the Fund of Indotel Communications, and is former coordinator for information and technology of Dominican Republic, and is associate investigator for the Committee of Feminine Committee. She has been pioneer within Indotel. It was the first president of the Internet Association Dominican Republic since January 2015. Amparo is also a member of the team that makes up the advisor group of the governments and the cooperation of names of domain, and member of the jury of COFIN for 10 years. We have Hector Pizarra, who's Director of Engineering of Telecommunication of Central America, Contelca, where he coordinates activities for technical assistance and also coordinates strategy work groups of the Commission. Before that, Hector has been in different board of directors positions in telecommunications sector, and he is an electronic engineer and comes with a master's in business administration and telecommunications of the Central American University Jose Simeon Cañas of El Salvador. And lastly, we have Dan Romero, who is executive of the Central American group and works in the technical groups and economic investigation. Ramal is economist of the University of Costa Rica, and before that he worked in the Central Bank of Costa Rica. He has a PhD in economy and in the London School of Economics. As you can see, we have a panel of people, very distinguished person with great experience, each one in their own role of specialization. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation. I'm going to not to speak too much on this. Many of you were probably assisted in different, they saw numbers of the e-commerce and trade facilitation that was mentioned at the beginning, and the e-trade has been defined in the companies, and the habits of purchasing, and this also poses challenges and opportunities for the MSME. As you all know, e-commerce is very dimensional. When we think of public policies and sanctions, it has many, it's a table that has different legs, and if one of those legs doesn't work well, then it moves, and then everything turns over. So what we're going to do today is asking each one of the participants in the panel different questions, and each one of the dimensions with connectivity, with digital payments, and the capacity of the MSME to make e-commerce and digital commerce, and also development in the private sector. In order not to delay ourselves more, I'm going to ask with the first question. If e-commerce has grown a lot, especially during the pandemic, all of the region, there's some indicators present some backlogs or lags. And in the region, there's many things. So the questions will make you understand where these gaps come from and what can we do is to shorten these gaps. The first question is, Mayra, is to adapt the process and to participate in a more participated, more complete. And in this sense, that technologies are considered as assets. And in this sense, the World Bank has said recently that they had work where they diagnosed the digital and innovation in Central America and going more in depth the different characteristics of the digital ecosystem. And one of the main barriers is the difficulty of access to funding of the MSMEs in order to be able to finance this digital transformation. So I wanted to ask you, taking into account your experience and studies, is that this experience for the MSSP is difficult to find funding for digital commerce. If it is an exclusion, they don't know how to present a portfolio of credit, or they don't know about the funding, or if there's a business that the businesses are not accustomed to financing. I would like you to talk a little bit about your vision.
Well, thanks, Bernardo, and thanks to Sempromit for the invitation. And really, I congratulate you for organizing this important event. Companies perceive lots of challenges when adopting technologies, and the challenges that are over 50% of the SMEs from our study include the cost of acquisition of new technologies and the cost of changing old technologies and the lack of funding to buy and use those technologies. In regard to funding access, this is an area that is not considered in the majority of Latin American countries. The report, Findex report from the Global World Bank from 2021 reports an important gap in financial inclusion. It has been mentioned that 36%, FedEx mentions that 36% of the adults that have no banking access say that banking services are too expensive, and this is double as much in this case for Latin America and the Caribbean. In countries like Honduras, Nicaragua, and Panama, more than 60% of adults don't have banking access, and they have mentioned the cost as a barrier. Also, access of and not to have access to funding requires to have access. Companies are required to have 3 years of operations and also have assets that can support their operations. So this leads to go to other entities that provide very costly loans. And so digital companies need capital more than any debt, but the capital fund market and the risk capital market in Central America is underdeveloped. We can say that the value of emergent companies in the market is $319 million approximately, which is 0.14% of the value of the whole ecosystem in Latin America, which is $221 million. Even if this is small, only 15% of the innovators who look for innovations, they find investors in the first year. Certain studies about the programs for incubators, they focus mainly in the managerial development as well as capacities for companies during their first stages, but only few of them offer access to funding. And this is maybe an important challenge. As the markets in all the countries in Central America are small, our study recommends to establish regional funding facilities or proposals so that the countries can make use of the governmental programs, like, for example, the Fundepro programs in El Salvador, and co-fund digital transformation projects with the goal or target companies together with investors and private companies. Also for this, it is important to support the incubator services or accelerating services. For example, there's a program, IFC Catalyst. This is a service through which capital investments are made in a series of incubators and accelerators with seed capital and funds for emergent markets. And they at the same time support entrepreneurs and companies in their first stage. It is important to consider innovating financial instruments like hybrid bonds, capital debt, and also the funding of purchase orders and invoicing. And lastly, I'd like to mention that the regulatory framework in the majority of countries need to be unified and harmonized to promote financial innovation and access to funding, including also other regulations like minority investors and fintech regulations. So the development goals need to be established to promote the growth of SMEs and other entrepreneurial measures in the region. So with this, I leave you, and I'm gladly answer to any question. Thank you, Mayra, and very good that you mentioned the topic about informality, because sometimes companies have to go to informal sources of funding that have high cost, and that also you mentioned the incubators, the accelerators, seed capital, and as you know, there is a lack of regulatory frameworks. There are certain sectors that are trying to innovate with other non-traditional information sources, banks, which are very interesting topics that will emerge during our Q&A section. Another important topic, which is one of the basic things that when we talk about e-commerce have to do with digital structure and internet connectivity. And to that purpose, we are going to place some questions. As we know, in Central America, in general, they have a high mobile phone penetration rate. And as a matter of fact, we are seeing an important growth of e-commerce through purchases done through laptops, through telephones instead of laptops. And it means that the quality of internet interconnection, they are still below the level in other regions. And this makes the connection to certain services difficult, or for example, you want to publish something on Facebook, Instagram, and that also makes it difficult to do payments through internet because there are problems in the interconnectivity, and this causes problems for the entrepreneurs and also traders from the rural zones. For example, in regard to fintech data, this is lower than 30%. So what I wanted to ask is, what do you think the Central American countries need to democratize access to internet and promote digital development with a greater coverage, but with a more accessible cost? Thank you very much, Bernardo, for your presentation. Good afternoon to all of you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to thank the organizers for the opportunity of participating in this interesting panel. I'd like to start telling that we're living in times where everything transforms and grows at a very high speed. We are immersed in a technological and social revolution that makes progress and advances at the incredible speed. And innovating technologies like artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, blockchain, robotic technology, virtual reality, augmented reality, they all emerge and converge and are start a new era that is important and impactful with human interaction, and also generate production, consumption. In all the world, we saw how the pandemic promoted the digital transformation of the societies, like home office and online banking. These are only a few of the activities that have become important around the world. And this trend you can see in Central America, of course, in an uneven way, but definitely in our countries are going towards digital transformation. And even if we have had progress in connectivity, we still face certain challenges. But the digital environment is growing importantly in our countries. In comparison with developed companies in our countries, there are important opportunities to grow, and this makes us a key scenario to the advancement of digital activities. Of course, we have not to forget pending things like the digital gap and connectivity. And in the last year, Central America has had important step with technological applications and internet application. But this is with lack of balance. For example, I guess that 60% of the Central American users are connected to the internet, and this is good news. But when we ask ourselves in which conditions, then the answer is really worrying, because as you say, the majority has a connection through the cell phone, and they have a prepaid phone, and this implies quality connection, but with going back with quality in regard to what people experience in society. So it means that this situation about internet and this lack of balance continues being a problem, so that to face digital gap is important, and it requires important investments to improve access and to incentivize citizen participation, and also the participation of the private sector. Governments can facilitate inclusion and with services and other inclusive regulations. In certain countries where they have clear regulations, they attract 50% more investments in technology. And when the technology goes forward in a quicker way, we require regulations that don't stop innovation. We need regulatory steps that promote technology, collaboration, that promote also the digital transformation. So for all of this, we don't have to lose sight that it is the government and its agencies who need to place that framework. That is why we need to have a comprehensive vision of all that is included. But of course, enough resources to achieve the desired results. So it is here where we see the important need of creating multidisciplinary spaces for work. Could be the case that we could place the general recommendations to have also the necessary regulations in working with key partners of the private sector, NGOs or other regulators who will be able to create an environment with all these emergent technologies built and developed with two important factors that have been mentioned, which is the security and the privacy of the consumer, where digital products and services are inclusive, affordable, and innovative. You cannot think that the regular or traditional regulators they have to be part of the academy or the private sector to arrive to have to framework that makes it possible to have financial inclusion. Perfect. I think that you were mentioning two very important points. And there's one topic that you mentioned, which is security and confidence framework that has to do with the regulatory framework. Maybe we can have a couple of questions to this regard. But before that, I'd like to ask how people get in contact with the digital environment. But if people don't know how to perform themselves and they don't develop digital capacities to move confidently and with knowledge, then probably the process remains incomplete. So in this regard, I'd like to ask Amparo, and in terms of her work at SICA, digital strategy and civil strategy, it has elements that capture the essence of what interconnectivity, juridical framework or legal framework, all that has to do with the digital capacities of people and businesses. So I'd like to ask, which is the vision of SICA in regard to digital capacities? And if there are certain practices that the government needs to take into account to implement training programs and capacity building, particularly in regard to SMEs, vulnerable populations, who are the ones that face important gaps. Well, thank you, Alberto. I'd like to greet you all. Thank also Sempromipe for including us. I'm going to talk in my quality as pro tempore president or chairman, chairwoman of SICA. For us, it's an important opportunity to work in these spaces as partners. I know that I have a short time, 5 to 6 minutes, and it's important to mention that a couple of years ago, we prepared the first strategy in SICA. This was a strategy promoted with lots of support from the Dominican Republic and also with the whole support of the Central American countries. And this is how we were able to last year be able to rescue the strategy. We were able to approve the strategy. We have like an ad hoc group where all the countries are members. And then we were able to review the strategy, and we thought this is important, and I wasn't here yesterday, but we are all clear that digital transformation, digitalization is a cross topic. It's not about if you want to do this or not. We have this challenge, climate change, digital inclusion, and all of this. I would like to frame within the SICA strategy. We have 10 areas of action. There are 2 that have to do with the creation of security capacities, and the second one has to do with the digital economies. And this means that in the framework of the digital strategy, we are prioritizing the institutional mechanisms of SICA so that we can work together and network with Sempromipe and all the rest of the entities of SICA. And I'd like to comment later on the Central American region and the Dominican Republic. A certain time ago, I listened to a very interesting panel that someone was saying broadband infrastructure. But if we don't have the population with the knowledge, with the culture, as someone was saying, if you don't have that sensitivity, that culture, then this is not working. If you have, even if you have available technology, it's not going to be available, and there are still going to be barriers. There are going to be 3 barriers. First of all, Mayra was saying, from on the side of funding, the cost, affordability, still broadband services access is. We're talking here that we need a minimum of 4G so that we can say that people are connected significantly. We also have a topic, and I don't have the exact number, but in Dominican Republic, the surveys tell us that people say that they are not knowing how to use technology. We are learning with social networks or social media, but there's still an important challenge. And the third aspect has to do with people feeling secure, people feeling safe. And it is important because, unfortunately, with all the situations that we have had, like in Costa Rica, what has happened, the Dominican Republic, where we have also suffered complicated attacks, then the population feels like all these topics about cybersecurity are incorporating, but at the same time being a barrier because people say, I cannot put my credit card on this platform and things like that. So it's the first action line is what has to do with competencies and digital capacity development. And this has to be centered, all the training processes have to be broad and incorporate everyone, the population that are going to be the consumers. We need to incorporate them. And obviously all our public sector, we need to include them. Also our entrepreneurs and our small and medium entrepreneurs. I prepared an information where the regional in Central America is 57 million people. And this is important because 35% are young people and 50.8% are women. So this tells us that we need to work with those training programs in an inclusive way. The other thing that we need to do and have to promote at the different levels, we do have an urban population that is relatively educated. We still have a population that is lives in extreme poverty, but will use the technologies they can use it. We have young people, we have women, so we need to have an inclusive and holistic approach. We also understand that from ENG and whatever be approved has to do with the digital transformation project that is being proposed by Sempromipe, by the Comisca, the women at SICA, health sector. And all this has to be integrated with a project for development of capacities, and because otherwise, if we don't have universal access, we will still face challenges, including for access to broadband. I was seeing reports of broadband from the IEB, and it reads, Costa Rica broadband penetration level 97.16, very high. Panama 79%, third place Dominican Republic. So what happens? There has been a redefinition of what broadband is encouraged because they lowered the levels. And starting from there, Honduras 32%, mobile broadband, Nicaragua 18%, 19%, Guatemala 10%, Belize 30%. That means I'm not even going to read the indicators. So we have a barrier, access barrier of having that connectivity, that access to the broadband, mobile, and if we take this indicator where when we talk about broadband index, it's an important measure about applications and content. And you have to see that Central American countries have a progress level of 6%, and Australia has 7%. What we have is 264, 328, 415, 422, and the highest is Costa Rica, of course, who has 5.32. So what does this mean? First, we have important deficits in our formal educational systems, but if we add additional deficits in digital technologies, I will continue saying and mentioning that we have a project that we want to prepare. We are looking for the funding at this moment. We're going to have partnerships with the European Union. We have part in digital promotion. We want to promote all that has to do with the digital economy for companies. We want to use all these synergies to launch the project and support the project for the creation of capacities. They were saying that at least the Dominican Republic has been working in digital transformation, basic and intermediate, and certain things are very basic. But something that I heard during the last panel is that the focus needs to change. We cannot go from the trainers to the users, small users. What do the entrepreneurs need? What are their concrete needs in digital matters? So we need to go back to the process and do the path, starting from what the small enterprises are needing within the framework of opportunities provided, like intelligence, artificial intelligence, big data, platforms, so that we can guide projects so to be really more effective, more efficient in making use of these projects. And I'd like to end by saying, pay attention. Mayra was mentioning something important. Where are women here? Where are
importante indígena también, y todo esto cuando hablamos de unos procesos de formación inclusivos, amplios, y que estén todos y todas.
And whenever we talk about broad visions of gender and so on, all of this.
Por ejemplo, el SEABAT en Nicaragua, que es un tema importante que nosotros podemos rescatar también para los procesos de las pequeñas y medianas empresas. Y lo dejo aquí.
Perfecto. Muchas gracias. Te dejé unos minutos más porque sé que por ahí te tenés que retirar antes.
Thank you very much.
No tengo luz desde Fiona. Tenemos un problema en mi edificio, en mi centro de trabajo, pero igual
Por
me
las
conecto
dudas.
por el celular.
Perfecto. Bueno, de entre todas las cosas que mencionaste,
Of everything that you mentioned, maybe because we trusted you or because of confidence, if there's a particular aspect of all of the environment that has a lot to do with trust, is an issue of payment, how much the people are willing to give their personal information, the data of their banking information or the card numbers, or if they already have a form of payment, they have to move cash. And so then they can see all the instructions. I would like to give the floor to Randall Romero to comment their mission from the Central American Monetary Council, which is or which are the reasons that are behind these gaps in the use of electronic payments or greater penetration of digital payments, if there are issues of trust or what infrastructure, like Hector said, or capacities or payment issues, and what is the regional policy on this topic, and what mechanisms a regional perspective could be facilitating greater interoperability or interconnection, thinking if you have a special comment that would be interesting in the more transboundary context to see the use of cash by definition makes these types of transactions absolutely impossible. So your perspective about this dimension of digital payment. Thank you very much, Fernando, and good afternoon to the panel members and to everybody who's following us. Thank you for the invitation. You asked two questions. For one, we have very few answers, and for another one, I have a bit more. I think the topic has already been mentioned quite a bit, and it's rather complex. And what to do in the countries of a higher financial in depth, there's no simple answer for this, but it's undeniable that countries that are in the banking in area, many of the payment technologies are precisely married to the banks. For example, if I have an MSME and I need to receive payments, my clients need to have a bank account or a credit card in order to be able to make that payment. Now, at least from our position here at the Monetary Council, we do not enter so much into domestic forms of payment. Rather, we work in the regional part. This is why I was saying for the first part of your question, I had very little to contribute, but for the more regional part is where we work more. And I tell you that there's a policy that the central banks cooperate on this particular issue to the point that since in 2006, and a treaty, the regional payment treaty was signed, and this is a legal instrument of transnational payments where the parties, it's not even the banks, it's the states that commit to respect, and it has to do with issues of legal security. If I make a payment from here to Dominican Republic, that they need to respect certain standards, and after I paid it, the person on the other side receives a payment link, and the rules of the game are marked. And this is a first step for a later instrument, which started to work in 2000, is just for regional payments, and they don't manage payments, domestic payments of a country. And to make a payment, take it out of Costa Rica and send it to Guatemala is managed in the local payment network. But for regional payments, it is quite important. The attractive part of this, I don't know if once you've had the experience of sending money to somebody outside of the country, uh, and for whatever reason you have to make a payment, and it's let's say a more commercial bank. I need to pay Bernardo. I don't know if he's in Buenos Aires, and I need him to give me his information of his account, where he lives, and the commercial bank here is probably going to charge $30 to $40 of commission, and probably what I wanted to send was 20. So this was the commission was more expensive than what I was trying to send. So having identified this problem to send payments that are relatively expensive, that is justified with a rather large payment. But when it's a small payment, the council, it gave green light to this project itself. We shouldn't even call it a project. We should call it a reality. And through this channel, we're moving nearly 380 payments per month. And this represents $112 million that have crossed borders through this channel. The attractive part that it has is a cost. The payment as such, the commission, is not proportional to payment, but it's a fixed amount. Another one of the attractive parts of it is the $5 that are charged. In the example that I gave, it could happen that I sent to Bernardo $200, and his bank has a commission to receive international payments, and so it dilutes more than the payment. And besides that, that channel doesn't even have an estimation a priori of a certainty of how long will that payment take to be into the person's bank account of another country. So the system is there for that the payments at this time take a maximum of 2 hours to be accredited in the country, and this obliges that during the operation hours from Monday to Friday, somebody has to be receiving the payment, so that should be sent in 2 hours time. But apart from that, besides that, we're working on automating so that the payments are automatic. I have a question. Do you have an idea of the volume it has to do with transactions of e-commerce, and how much is linked to services or a transfer of money among persons? How much of this is enabling transboundary e-commerce, or are we still at the level of transfer of money among persons, which are not necessarily more commercial type of operations? I don't have that information, unfortunately. At least what we are able to observe at the Secretariat is from what country to another, to what other country are we going to be moving the money? And we don't even have the identity of the client, so what type of clients? So in the chain of how the statistics are generated, I see a step from Guatemala to Honduras for how much and at what date, and I don't know who is sending to whom and for what reason it's being sent, so I cannot answer that part to you. I would also like to add, the system works very well, except for the size. We're moving very few payments compared to the potential of payments that could be moved, taking into account the attraction that I said it's a low cost compared with the alternatives. It is clear that there's a challenge here, and how we make these figures grow a bit more of what they have been growing in the last 12 years that it has been in operation. It depends on the demand. I think many of you had probably never heard of this system, so nobody is going to demand a product that you don't even know that it exists. The second, so it's all related with the banking topic to send money from one country to another, that money is going to travel from one account to another account. The origin of destination doesn't have a bank account, then the transfer is not going to be carried out. And maybe even more complex is the advantage that at the same time is a disadvantage, the cost, because the cost of $5 has been thought because we wanted to facilitate these payments, but there's a slight Achilles heel on this. The service is still being provided by commercial banks. The banks used to charge you $40. Of these 40, there's $10 in cost and 30 of revenues to make or earnings to make the payment. The five, we know that definitely you have $3.50 is going to be the cost of the messaging uh, of the payment. And probably this is the thing is that we have the fact that it's so cheaper is that the commercial bank is not interested to tell their clients use the system because it's faster and it's cheaper, or will probably send the transfer even faster, even more so, taking into account that we have a regional banking system that without there being commercial, there's back and La Fisa, they can make operations among their own branches or between their own banks and different parts of the region at a quite a competitive cost. So a bank will not really want to take up some service that is going to be a competition. Yes, these are interesting. These challenges, maybe later we can speak because there's a more a different question to all. But before that, I wanted to give the opportunity to Jorge Hasbun in order to comment. And we're based at these last few minutes, a few topics, we went from funding and capacity development and financing and payment. I wanted to ask Jorge, how do you see it in the private sector of the businesses? How do you see these dimensions? And you probably identify greater challenges so that the companies can really participate more actively in e-commerce, not only logistically, but also as an avenue to enter into regional presentation of this challenge. How do you see the companies challenging to these, uh, preparing to these challenging? Thank you, Bernardo, and greeting to all the members who participate today. There is a problem of origin. Let's remember that in El Salvador, nearly 75–80% of the economy is informal. And all of the topics that we have talked about of funding and others, usually the informality is an obstacle. Nobody is going to finance at rates that can be paid if you're a person that doesn't have formal accounting or a formal scheme. Now, the biggest obstacle for formality is the very complex tax system that our countries have, that you need to have a certified accountant, a lawyer, a notary. You have to be a Superman to lead a business. You have to go to 20 different offices. So it would seem that the system is pushing informality instead of pushing or going for formality. I always say that this topic for us is one of the the largest social exclusion topics of the countries, to oblige the people for the complexity and the monthly cost of having formal accounting to become informal in the United States. You fill in a form online, and the next day they're selling through Facebook or through Google or whatever, and they're completely formal. And here there's no regime or excuse me to interrupt, and I have a question. So this is very fundamental and a more cross-cutting issue. Independently of the commercial channel, maybe there's still other regulations that make it difficult to create businesses. When we think in terms of e-commerce and digital channels, where would you think specifically with those channels that are the main barriers? Let's say that you can open a Facebook page as an individual, buy merchandise, you are informally, since we're talking about specifically about the MSME, that's a reality of the MSME. What happens, the MSME, to say something, they make $3,000 a month and they want to bring in $20,000 of merchandise. What formal bank or public bank is going to lend if they don't have a formal accounting system? The person is not even thinking and evolving digitally, but simply seeing how eh, they pay to exclusive and fiscal issue, the part of the confidence in the citizen, the usurer, how they pay what they say over there, death and taxes. You can't step aside from that, but they trust that you're not going to do anything wrong with the society. And they allow you and they say to open an office in one day. And part of this, if you commit a mistake, then you get fined. But here in our country, we start from the principle of distrust, where all of the seals, 20 seals and 18 signatures and 16 offices, and later you still need to go to make 5 more procedures in order to become formal. So in general, this is a cross-cutting issue. It's a topic that really pulls you towards the informality, and the people are having informality rather looking forward. They have to resolve on the day-to-day and the commitments acquired, see how they can pay them. And even we know that the MSME companies are the large amount of entrepreneurships, the informal and at least in Central America, they're approximately over 60% of informal. And then informal doesn't have access to credit. And many times international software companies can give you a personal type of license, but you're enjoying of the fiscal issues because you're not a formal company. There's so many elements that are tied to this, the complexity of the tax system. If you have already overcome this in your business, that one way or another is able to come forward with all this information, you're not only a micro, but maybe can become a small company, and somehow you're financing all of this tax cost of having all these papers. What is the next step? We see, and we've had many meetings with universities and technical institutes, because what is occurring is that the educational systems are educating and giving careers to the people that commercially requested and not what the system or the companies require. I am businessman. I want to give the client what they ask, but in the educational system, you have to give the clients what they need. And what they need, who needs what? The strategic bets of the country, whether it's called logistics or technology or innovation and program, whatever you call it, it's a strategic bet. If you have a strategic bet where all the stakeholders are involved, and the educational system has to educate these people so that the strategical proposal can be made. And second, what is the supply and what is the demand? So it has to be demand driven, not only based on what the future students want. Also, what happens is that you have a large amount of frustrated persons. What you need is computer technicians. The technicians or the experts in Java and technology, in any of the Central American countries, we would have 10,000 more people that know about Java and would be earning money. These countries or making programming towards other countries, what we have at 30,000 frustrated accountants. This is a very serious structural problem. If you don't have a formalized business, you won't have access to many of the benefits. And if it's not formalized, it's because we have fiscal system that is very difficult. And second, we are not going to be able to evolve and make our business evolve if you don't have the necessary capabilities. And this is fundamental.
Clarísimo, clarísimo.
Very clear. Thank you. And so these issues are very basic in general for development, more than issues that have to do with entrepreneurial development and the capacity and accumulation of human capital. We have a couple of minutes and I wanted to ask a question to each one, and I would like to ask you to please not overstep 2 minutes so that we can have a couple of minutes from the public. We talk about national issues, but many of you emphasize regional aspects, and I wanted to ask you, from your point of view, what actions do you think can be taken at the regional level among the governments to try to consolidate through the digital channels process of regional. You talk about regional digital markets, and they have strategies for this. So I wanted to ask you to briefly expose what are for you the priorities in the sense or actions that can be taken at the level of the region to strengthen and go more in depth of the through the digital channels, if you would like, Mayra, and give us more your vision from the point of view of the regional efforts that could be made to create a risk capital market where the region can have a greater scale than the countries that it individually or financial issues that can bring more investment to the region, for example. The truth is that I was thinking on other uh, on other aspects. I was thinking that in reality, what Jorge was saying has a lot to do with regulatory aspect is a problem in all of the Central American countries. And the regulatory harmonization is even a bigger problem. If it's a problem to have a regulatory process in each country, it's an even greater problem, the regulatory harmonization. In order to make e-commerce, you need at least 2 countries. Well, if you're going to carry out transboundary e-commerce, in this case, we, besides these topics of this diagnosis that we made on the digital topics, we have a program with the World Bank of trade facilitation. And one of the topics that we saw, because with the study that we made a survey for more than 2,000 entrepreneurs, and we see that there's series of issues, but on the regulatory issues, we saw, for example, that the regulation of urgent shipments, the issue of regulating the urgent shipments and bring them out quickly, air cargo needs to be fast, but not even that is fast sometimes. So we have thought on urgent shipments, and in fact, we have proposed to the 6 countries of Central America a regulation a bit more general to generate to how a small amount that could be made in e-commerce without the need to make so many procedures and without paying some of the fees. For example, we made an analysis on this just recently about other countries that were not from Central America. We realized that the United States, for example, has 800 or $850 for deliveries to make e-commerce. If we know that every problem have a fiscal problem at this time, but the return that could enter because of the reduction of the de minimis, and I'll leave it here to give space to the rest. Thank you very much. Hector, would you like to tell us a couple of comments from you? Talking a bit more about what Mayra was saying, regional application. And here, we have always thought that if multiple regulators from different countries collaborate among themselves and with those that are being regulated, this could promote innovation and protect the consumers of possible fraud because of security issues. And what he was talking about the policies and the fiscal burden and the procedures, it doesn't only affect the MSME, but is cross-cutting on access connectivity. The responsible persons on policy issues, we would probably see financial incentives that could be direct or indirect for the customers or for the digital operators. Let's say demanding internet, particularly for the people that could also reduce the tax and customs duties and have a low cost on the internet. And this will allow to decrease the cost of people who have uh, uh, their purchasing power is not so much. And so to see a minimum fiscal incentives, this will allow the operators to extend the service that is not being attended. Thank you very much, Amparo. Thank you, Alberto. A couple of things. I think it's important from the point of view of the security capacity that we need to promote at the Central America level and Dominican Republic, a regional framework of competencies and skills, and seeing from what the MSMEs need. And so I think that we're working on this, and then later on we can hold bilateral meetings because we're working on a transboundary project on technology, and this is being worked with Panama. This is very interesting to see the exchange of transboundary issues, especially with Central America. And we are doing it with our neighbor Haiti. And one of the previous colleagues, I don't know if it was Jorge or somebody before him, from the infrastructure of the payment system. This is very important at the regional level to be able to work on this. And as Mayra was saying, is this is where things start to become difficult, and we have to reach certain points. And there's a very important point, a regional digital security strategy. As pro temporary presidency of SICA in the Dominican Republic, we are working on a regional framework, a security regional framework, and the cybersecurity, because this also affects not only the big companies, but it also will affect the small companies, very important. And lastly, I didn't want to not mention it, we have to work policies, aspect policies. As a region, we have to promote spectrum for mobile technologies and to close the digital gap. The statistics, as I said at the beginning, mobile bandwidth and short bandwidth, the connectivity challenges are very big, and the spectrum topic cannot be left to one side. We have to say, we have to work with that. I'm going to talk personally because the comments that I'm about to make is not something that we have discussed openly at the Secretariat, so I do not want to imply the monetary council. At least from my point of view of what I was saying, with the internal payments, it's a little bit. The first step is to work with the banks. Why the banks don't work with the people? Because there are people who don't have accounts. And so if you work with the banks and determine what is the reason for the fact that this is probably just cost and it's not profitable for a bank to open an account for people with lower income people, and they should change the regulations and maybe to have a simplified files when the requirements of the accounts are smaller, and we leave to one side the problem of the control of money laundering that imply enormous cost to the bank. Or how are the justice systems working in the country? This is a cost to the financial system. We have mentioned the cost of loans that are very high in general in Central America. But a part of this, the creditor are the costs that they're taking when he is not being paid, and the risk of this is very difficult. And so if you recover the money or whatever little bit of money that you charity you have because this can last 4 to 5 years in order for you to be covered to be paid with higher interest. One would have to see what other things affect the cost structure of the bank and to see how we help them in this sense so that they could if they could integrate more people. And thinking very, very out loud, we have seen in recent topics that because of the Bitcoin, they are trending the digital dollars and currencies of central banks and digital currency. We have to think that that topic is going around onto to what point? What are the objectives? So the digital currency could be banked. Yes, of course. This is a topic that needs to be analyzed and not so simple as I said with the central bank. And so, of course, yes.
Thank you. And last, Jorge, would you like to add something? Or at the regional level, if you'd like to add something. Well, thank you. And look, the deep Central American integration is clear. We need to have a common Central American market that is integrated with the highest number of legislations available without losing national identity. And I, in a certain way, am cautious with a complete freedom for e-commerce in international e-commerce with the region, because we have a case in Dominican Republic where practically people introduce or import any type of product from Amazon or from Alibaba with fake invoices, and they have destroyed thousands and thousands of employments because it's not fair competition. So you have to do things well, and you have to do things step by step. And also, I think that the initial step is to make a deep regional integration. And I guess with this, the countries and the markets are going to become attractive if we have a simplified scheme that gives access to non-formal agents. Perfect. Amparo needs to leave, so we'll use this time to thank her for her interventions, important comments that she made. I don't know if we have a couple of moments to deal with certain questions from the public. Maybe do we have 2 to 3 minutes? Yes, let's do this. 2 to 3 minutes. There's a question from the audience that has to do with some of the aspects that were mentioned, that has to do with the regulatory topic and how digital economy crashes with certain borders, regulatory borders, technology limits. And the question is how this can be regulated. It has to be regulated beforehand, or something that is in different areas. What is the balance? Regulation, innovation, and then how to understand and go back to regulation. I don't know if someone has a specific comment or vision on this. Maybe I would like to say something. Yes, you know, we believe that there has to be a facilitation. I mean, making it easier for the companies to act with simple frameworks from the governmental side. So you have to make things simplified. You don't want Facebook to tell the Ministry of Finance every time or each time someone sells. This is irreal, not real. You have to have a simplified system and trust in the people. Of course, there has to be a check and balance, but I don't think that it would need to be regulated a priori. It needs to be made easy, you know, and facilitate a scheme. One more minute, one more. Hector, or yes, in regard to this regulations, I believe that from the perspective of approaches and regulatory processes, they should allow for certain experiments the use of like sandboxes that can help correct without affecting very much, and that is important. Also, transparency and flexibility, and that could help for a regulatory framework to be favorable to for e-commerce and other electronic transactions, provide connectivity, logistics, and e-commerce. Well, thank you. We're out of time. I don't know if you wanted to say something, Randall? Very, very quick. Maybe to say yes to what you mentioned, because things are too much regulated. Before starting thinking of it needs to be regulated, the first question is, why do we want to regulate this? And see, simply, this is, if we're going to think about regulations, it has to be in a way of protecting the consumers, generating confidence and trusting, so that consumers can buy with more confidence. That means it has a governmental protection because the activities have been regulated, but it has to be with that spirit. Promote the activity and not that much repress or stop the entrepreneur. Well, thank you. We'll leave that here. It's a very important topic. Trying to consider the opinion of the demand, the needs of the demand, people, companies with an inclusive approach. There are different populations, different geographies, and also, as I was saying, trying to strengthen regional integration and making progress going forward as quick as possible. Consider these gaps to the confirmation of the digital regional market in Central America, opening opportunities for more people. So thank you, everyone, for your panel members, Mayra, Hector, Amparo, myself, Jorge, Rondo, and all the interventions. Thank you. Well, thank you, Bernardo. It has been a wonderful and rich panel. We have seen many challenges that we have in the region that we need to overcome. The positive thing is that we have relevant actors, public and private, where we can, with concrete actions, promoting and going forward as an entity, promoting the digital transformation and come closer to our SMEs. So on behalf of Sempromet, I'd like to thank the representatives of Global Bank, everyone here present, Evi Campo, Indotel, Comtelca, also the Central American Monetary Secretariat, and thank you especially to you, Bernardo, for this excellent facilitation that you made in this panel regarding infrastructure and support to the digital transformation. So we're closing now this second day, the nominated infrastructure support for e-commerce in the region, and I now will allow to present to you and give now the space to our Executive Director, Mr. David Cabrera, who is going to give us those closing words of this high-level forum. Thank you, Katia. Can you hear me well? Perfectly, David. We can hear you well. Well, thank you, Bernardo, for your excellent moderation. Please give my regards to Mayra. Also, Hector, thank you very much for your vision from the private sector side. And thank you also for sharing the strategies and what the Central American Monetary Council or Committee is promoting. It has been 2 intense days in terms of input, and we are definitely going through a revolution, a digital revolution in Central America. We have seen data that show this, and e-commerce has been an important piece in resilience during the pandemic, and as it was highlighted yesterday during the panel, e-commerce democratizes the opportunities for SMEs. So we have presented data from our research, and we invite you to go deeper in them through our resources that we have here available at Sempromipa. We have brought to this 4 good testimonies, good practices, and specialists who confirm this. The reality is that there is a regional agenda to develop e-commerce, and we all need to promote this. So we have common challenges. We have studies in researchers that tell us that all the challenges are shared by all SICA countries. And also the study that the World Bank did at the beginning of this year confirms that about the need of this technological adaptation of SMEs. And we have seen this also in the survey that we did this year that confirms also the conclusions that we had at the beginning of our online programs. I believe that our work or task is first to coordinate and harmonize in the region together with the actors involved in this common Central American market from the digital perspective. And I believe, as Jorge was saying, the key is in a deep integration. And I believe that technology and digitalization can accelerate that process. And also the institutions, they have to take their own responsibility. As it has been said, our task of digital transformation continues with the SMEs and also transformation of the environment. From Sempromipe, we have done this first effort that I would like to scale up and do this in a more impactful way. We have done this through strengthening capacities of SMEs that definitely have changed their way of doing business. So we are working also from the Sempromipe side in providing alternative financial solutions to give an answer to those 85% of SMEs that don't have access to credit. So we invite to a dialogue, coordination, and harmonizations to overcome these challenges and the advances that we have made in logistics, trade facilitation for companies in the region, and especially in the digital market, to promote an environment where e-commerce is an effective tool for growth for our companies. We have to address several topics that we have put at the table during these 2 days. First, financial inclusion, connectivity, update the disciplines of the digital economy, data protection, digital data, electronic signature, and so on, and also strengthen the capacities of the companies as well as work deeper or further in the facilitation of e-commerce. For example, risk management, which are topics that have emerged during these 2 days, should help integration because it is fundamental to make process in this process of facilitating e-commerce with coordinated processes. Central America has to make use of this deep transformation to facilitate simplified processes and confidence process also with SMEs. So thank you, everyone. And also thank you especially to the Sempromipe team who has been working very hard to make this possible. Katia, Gabriela, thank you so much for your support. And well, it is now our time to continue working. We have a big job ahead. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, David, and thank you everyone for your participation, active participation in this high-level regional tour, facilitation, infrastructure, and promotion of the regional e-commerce of SMEs. I'd like again to thank our strategic partner, the Department of State of the United States of America, who has contributed broadly in the realization of this space. So I'd like to invite you to go to our research centers at Sempromipe. We have been sharing through all this today's the link where you will find all the documentation and all the recordings. So from Sempromipe, we wish you lots of success. Thanking you for being with us in this valuable space for reflection that provides us concrete action lines for collaboration and a system for entrepreneurial development with relevant actors, regional and intra-regional, international, to democratize e-commerce for our Central American SMEs. So may you all have a good afternoon or a good evening wherever you are. So greetings.